The Las Vegas Raiders are bringing in quarterback Jaylen Milroe for a private visit, and this could mean something big for the team. Why are they interested in him? What does this say about their future plans? Let's break it all down. Milroe is an exciting prospect. He's got raw talent, explosive speed, and huge potential. When I first watched his game tape, I was impressed, not just by what he is today, but by what he could become. Early in the season, he showed flashes of greatness. His athleticism stood out immediately, but as the season went on, his performance dipped, and that hurt his draft stock. Once considered a top 10 pick, now he's seen as more of a developmental player. But for the Raiders, that might not be a bad thing. They need a young quarterback they can mold into the future leader of the franchise. Aiden O'Connell was given a shot, but he might not be the long-term answer. Milroe, on the other hand, has the physical tools to be something special. He reminds me of a mix between Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. Not quite as fast as Lamar, but more athletic than Hurts. That kind of skill set is rare. Before we get into more details, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest Raiders updates. Now, let's continue. So why are the Raiders bringing him in? Smart teams don't wait until they're desperate for a quarterback. They plan ahead. Geno Smith is 35, and while he's still playing well, he won't be around forever. The Raiders need to develop someone now who can take over when the time comes. Milroe could be that guy. If he lands in the right system, one that gives him time to grow instead of throwing him into the fire, he could turn into a dangerous dual-threat quarterback. This visit is interesting, and it shows that the Raiders are thinking long-term. The question is, are they willing to take a gamble on Milroe? When Lamar Jackson first entered the NFL, I wasn't convinced. During his rookie season, I thought, this guy isn't going to make it. Even in his second year, he had his struggles. But then, something changed. By years 3, 4, and 5, Lamar had developed into a top-tier quarterback. The Ravens built a system around him, played to his strengths, and now he's easily a top 8 quarterback in the league. Jaylen Milroe could have a similar path. He's not going to be a star right away. He has a lot of growing to do, especially as a passer. Reading defenses downfield is still a challenge for him. But with the right coaching and time to develop, his potential is through the roof. If the Raiders play this smart, they won't rush him. They'll let him sit for a couple of years, learning behind a veteran. That's how you turn raw talent into a future franchise quarterback. Milroe has elite speed. Some reports say he ran a 4.3-second 40-yard dash at his pro day. That kind of athleticism is rare. You can't teach it. But what you can teach is decision-making, pocket awareness, and reading defenses. Now, let's talk draft strategy. Milroe isn't a first-round pick, and that's actually a good thing. The Raiders could land him in the second round, maybe even the third. And if you compare him to someone like Shedeur Sanders, who might go in the top 10, getting Milroe later in the draft could be an absolute steal. He's not polished yet, but his best football is still ahead of him. An NFL assistant GM recently said that people are wrong to label Milroe as just a running quarterback. His deep ball is a legit weapon, and he's more comfortable in the pocket than people realize. That's what makes him so intriguing. With the right system, the Raiders could turn him into something special. Jaylen Milroe's speed is no joke. He's fast enough to outrun cornerbacks, which is rare for a quarterback. But here's what makes him even more dangerous. His deep ball. He has the arm strength to launch passes downfield, and he's shown flashes of being able to read zone defenses well. But let's be real. College zone defense is not the same as what he'll face in the NFL. The field shrinks, defenders are faster, and windows close much quicker. Milroe will need time to adjust, and his decision-making must speed up. That's why development is key. If he lands in the right system with strong weapons around him, a good offensive line, a solid running game, and reliable pass catchers, he can grow into a real threat. For the Raiders, this could be a perfect situation. Milroe wouldn't need to start right away. He could sit and learn, just like Geno Smith did before becoming a capable starter. Geno spent years as a backup, developing behind the scenes, and when his moment came, he was ready. Milroe could follow that same path. It all comes down to patience. If the Raiders are willing to invest time in him, the payoff could be huge. A quarterback with elite speed, a strong arm, and time to refine his game, that's the kind of player who can change a franchise's future. Pete Carroll's words about Geno Smith are worth paying attention to. He stayed in close communication with him, and the moment Geno became available, the Raiders wasted no time making a move. Credit to General Manager John Spytek. He pulled it off quickly and honestly at a bargain. Giving up just a late third-round pick for a proven quarterback? That's a huge win for the Raiders. Now let's talk about what this means moving forward. The Raiders clearly see Geno Smith as their guy for at least the next few seasons. The team is already working on a contract extension, and while details aren't finalized yet, both Pete Carroll and Spytek sound confident that a deal will get done. So what's the plan? Most likely, Geno will be locked in for about 3 years, with maybe a team option for a fourth. This gives the Raiders stability at quarterback while also allowing time to develop a young prospect like Jaylen Milroe. But here's where things get interesting. Some believe the Raiders might be playing a bit of draft strategy. By not finalizing Geno's extension right away, they could be sending a message to other teams that they might take a quarterback early. This could cause teams like the Giants to panic and reach for a quarterback, allowing better players at other positions to slide down the board to the Raiders. Whatever the case, one thing is clear. The Raiders are thinking long-term. They have their veteran quarterback. They're looking at young talent to develop, and they're making smart moves in the draft. If they play this right, the future of the franchise could be in very good hands. Right now, the Raiders are keeping things a little mysterious, and that might be a smart move. By not announcing a final decision on their offensive line, they're letting other teams guess and maybe even make mistakes in the draft. But let's break down what's actually happening. General Manager John Spytek recently shared that 4 players are competing for the 2 starting guard spots: Paris Johnson, Dylan Parham, Alex Kappa, and Jordan Meredith. Meanwhile, outside of Kappa, the other 3 will also be in the mix for the center position. That's a lot of moving pieces, but it raises an interesting question. If the Raiders are already set on these guys, why are they bringing in players like Will Campbell and Charles Grant for visits? It makes you wonder if the Raiders are considering grabbing a top-tier offensive lineman in the draft. Both Campbell and Grant project as NFL guards, but Grant, with his long arms, could potentially play tackle as well. If the Raiders land one of them in the second round, they could end up with an elite-level player. After all, second-round guards often turn into Pro Bowl-caliber linemen. The concern here is whether the current roster is strong enough to give the Raiders a top-tier offensive line. Kappa, before his injury, looked solid, but post-injury, he hasn't been the same. Stronger defensive linemen have pushed him around. Parham has shown flashes of brilliance, but consistency has been an issue, and injuries haven't helped. As for Meredith, he does well against most defensive tackles, but against top-tier competition, he struggles. That's why the Raiders need to be smart about how they build this line. Paris Johnson should be the clear-cut starting center. He's already playing at an elite level, and by next season, he could be one of the best in the league. There's no reason to shuffle him to guard when elite centers are much harder to find. Guards? Those are easier to replace if you invest properly. Bottom line, this offensive line is still a work in progress, and the Raiders know it. Whether they stick with what they have or make a move in the draft, this decision will be crucial for the team's success next season. Elite centers are rare in the NFL, and the Raiders might already have one in Paris Johnson. Right now, the only center who comes close to his potential is Creed Humphrey of the Chiefs. These guys don't just block, they bulldoze defenders. That's the kind of impact player the Raiders need to anchor their offensive line. General Manager John Spytek also gave an update on another key area: wide receivers. The Raiders are still searching for a veteran wideout. Spytek mentioned they're looking at a few options in free agency, while also keeping an eye on this year's strong draft class. One interesting name that popped up: Hunter Renfrow. But don't get too excited. This wasn't a serious move by the Raiders. It seemed more like a courtesy visit. possibly to stir up interest from other teams. The Panthers had already met with Renfrow, and now, with the Raiders showing some interest, other teams might follow. But let's talk about the bigger picture. The Raiders need another top-tier wide receiver, and there are still big names available. Players like Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper could be game-changers. Keenan Allen, a precise route runner, thrives in tight coverage and can take hits while making tough catches. Amari Cooper, on the other hand, wins with elite separation, something that could complement the Raiders' offensive weapons perfectly. And don't forget Brock Bowers. While technically a tight end, he plays like a true number one receiver. Pairing him with a veteran like Cooper or Allen could make this offense lethal. Cooper's ability to create space would allow Bowers to thrive in different roles, making the Raiders' passing attack more unpredictable and dangerous. The bottom line: the Raiders aren't done yet. Whether it's through free agency or the draft, expect them to make a move at wide receiver. The goal is clear: build an offense that can dominate. The Raiders need another top-tier wide receiver, and Amari Cooper should be at the top of their list. Yes, he'll be 31 when the season starts, but that's not a deal-breaker. If the Raiders can get him on a reasonable 2-year deal, with the first year guaranteed and the second as a team option, this could be a major win. Even if Cooper puts up just 750 yards on 70 targets, that's still a huge upgrade. Cooper is a smooth route runner, a true separator, and far more polished than Jacoby Myers. The Raiders need a reliable X-receiver, and Cooper fits that role perfectly. Some other names have been floated around, like Tyler Lockett and Robert Woods, but both are aging, and neither brings the same level of consistency as Cooper. If the Raiders want to give Geno Smith the best chance to succeed, locking in a proven veteran like Cooper is the smart move. This also changes the draft strategy completely. With Cooper in the mix, the Raiders won't feel forced to reach for a wide receiver early. Instead of using a top pick on a receiver, they can focus on adding more playmakers and strengthening the offensive line. Imagine going into the season with a stacked offense: Geno Smith, Cooper, Brock Bowers, and a rock-solid O-line. That's a recipe for success. But let's not forget the defense. The Raiders' defensive line has the potential to be elite, and history has shown us that a dominant D-line can take over games and even push a team to the Super Bowl. We've seen it before. The Eagles' front dominated on their Super Bowl run, and even Patrick Mahomes struggled against relentless pressure. If the Raiders' defense steps up, this team isn't just looking at a playoff spot. They could be in the mix for something much bigger. One thing is clear: the Raiders have a real opportunity to build something special.